Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming your way. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I want to know how far this story has reached. No more waiting. Let's get into the video.
Snow fell in slow spirals over the endless white plains of Nera 7, blanketing the planet's skeletal terrain in silence so thick it seemed sacred. Every movement echoed, the hiss of hydraulics from ancient mining towers, the faint creak of metal expanding in the cold, and beneath it all, the low hum of a forgotten station buried in frost and solitude. The wind howled across jagged cliffs like a mourning spirit, but no one listened, not anymore. Inside the outpost, Damon Creed moved like a machine. His steps were calculated, precise. Power cells checked, hydro recyclers flushed, perimeter scanners verified. His breath was visible, even indoors, a mist in the sterile air. The lights flickered overhead, half of them long since dead. But Damon didn't notice. His world had narrowed long ago, to buttons, levers, routines. Time didn't pass here. It settled like dust and stayed. Once, Damon Creed had been a man with blood and fire, an officer, a husband. But all of that burned away 6 years ago when the ambush came, a corporate operation turned massacre on Eltari 5. His wife, Commander Raylene Creed, fell first. He had held her while she died. After that, he refused every honor, every reassignment. Instead, he chose this exile, self-imposed and absolute. They offered him medals. He asked for ice. Damon believed silence was healing. But really, it was just the shape his grief had taken. The outpost gave him nothing but distance, from memory, from emotion, from humanity. The cold couldn't freeze the pain, but it numbed the edges enough to go on. His days were all the same. Wake, work, scan the dead skies, sleep, and repeat. No visitors, no signals, no past, no future. He hadn't spoken aloud in months. Today was like any other, until it wasn't. At 0437 hours, the storm rolled in. Thick clouds cloaked the horizon, and visibility dropped to meters. Damon activated the shield dome and sealed the exterior locks. He checked the monitors, then retreated to his quarters. A metal cell with a cot and a photo of Raylene, cracked at one corner. Outside, the wind howled louder, more primal. Inside, he sat, and then, the silent alarm flashed red. Motion near the perimeter. Damon froze. No life signs had been recorded in this sector in 3 years. He rose, slowly, like ice cracking from within. Outside, something had come to disturb the silence, and Damon Creed, buried in snow and sorrow, was about to remember what it meant to be alive. The outer cameras flickered, blurred by the dense curtain of falling snow. Damon squinted at the screen, adjusting the filters to cut through the white static. There, near the collapsed supply tram line, movement, not wind, not debris, deliberate, precise. Someone was out there. He blinked, leaned closer. Tiny tracks, too small to be an adult, too orderly to be animal. He cursed under his breath and grabbed his coat, the heavy thermal one with reinforced plating. The airlock protested as it cycled open, its gears stiff from the cold. The world outside bit at his face instantly, sharp and merciless. He pulled the hood over his head and stepped out into the white void. The snow had swallowed the horizon. The station behind him vanished after a few meters, but the tracks, they led forward, half buried already, but clear. Damon followed them down a narrow ridge, his boots crunching with the deliberate rhythm of a man who did not want to remember how it felt to care. At the end of the tracks, nestled beneath a bent girder, was a shape, small, huddled, alive. He raised his plasma sidearm instinctively, but hesitated. The shape shivered violently, a thin arm raising over its head in a feeble motion of defense. Not a soldier, not a threat, a child, or something like it. He lowered the weapon. Damon approached, step by step, until he could make out the details through the snow. It was a creature, humanoid, maybe a meter tall, covered in thick white fur, its body trembling with cold and fear. Its large eyes blinked up at him, luminous and pale like twin opals in a face too angular to be human. Its fingers clutched at its side, where blood, thick and iridescent, seeped through a makeshift wrap. It was wounded, and it was staring at him like he was salvation. Damon hesitated. Every part of his brain screamed protocol, unknown species, possible contagion, stay clear. But something deeper whispered louder, "She's dying." He stepped forward, slowly, and knelt beside her. She didn't flinch. She only stared. "I don't know what you are," he muttered, barely audible over the wind, "but I'm not leaving you here." He wrapped her in his coat, lifting her easily. She was light, fragile, cold enough to burn. As he turned back toward the outpost, the wind roared louder, but it no longer felt empty. He didn't know her name, didn't know if it was a trap, but he knew this. She needed him. And maybe, just maybe, he needed her too. She slept for nearly 14 hours. Damon monitored her the entire time, watching the vital signs fluctuate on the med screen. Unfamiliar rhythms, impossible to interpret by human standards. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Her wound was deep, but he had done what he could. Cleaned it, sealed it with Dermabond, applied a localized heating field to keep her core temperature stable. He sat across the room, arms crossed, weapon still on the table, but untouched. The interior lights dimmed for nighttime mode, casting long shadows across the metallic walls. A faint hum from the station's old heating coils filled the silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of wind slamming into the exterior dome. She stirred near dawn. Her eyes opened, wide and opalescent, glowing faintly in the dark. She blinked once, twice, then sat up in a single fluid motion, the fur on her arms bristling. Damon stood, but kept his hands raised and open. "You're safe," he said calmly. "Inside, warm. No one's going to hurt you." She looked around, disoriented, then focused on her side. The bandages, the heat wrap, the sterile scent of human antiseptic. Her gaze snapped back to him, and then she hissed. A low, defensive growl rose in her throat as she slid backward off the cot. Limbs flexed, bearing small but sharp claws. Damon didn't move. "You were bleeding out. I patched you up. You were outside my perimeter. During the storm, I didn't have time to ask permission." She stopped. The growl faded. Then, something moved behind her. Another presence stepped from the shadows of the hallway. Tall, silent. Damon reached for the pistol, but stopped. The figure stepped into full view, nearly 2 meters of sinew and grace, clad in armor like liquid frost. Her skin shimmered like blue glass under ice. Her eyes, the same opaline shimmer, narrowed, measuring him. She did not raise a weapon, but her voice, when it came, was steel wrapped in silk. "You touched my daughter." Damon tensed. She was dying. The warrior, her fur-lined cape dusted with fresh snow, looked at the girl, then back at him. "She lives." A long pause. Then she did something he did not expect. She knelt, one knee to the floor, head bowed, and when she rose, her words echoed with a quiet, ancient strength. "By the laws of the Khe'lani, you are now of blood." Damon blinked. "What? You saved my child. You are kin, and kin protects kin. Always." She approached, closer than comfort allowed, and touched her forehead to his. A ritual, a vow. He didn't understand it, but he felt the weight of it settle into his bones. "My name is Kethra," she said softly. Then she turned to her daughter, and for the first time, Damon heard the girl's name. Elena. He looked at them both. Snow still howled outside, but inside the station, something had changed. He wasn't alone anymore. For the next 3 days, the storm outside raged without pause, a white fury of wind and ice that battered the station like the world itself was trying to claw its way inside. But within those walls, something unexpected began to thaw. Kethra remained, silent but vigilant, her eyes tracking every move Damon made. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer thanks. She only watched, with a warrior's discipline and a mother's quiet suspicion. Elena, meanwhile, recovered quickly. The child proved both curious and cautious, her feline features softening slightly each time Damon shared something. A ration bar, a tool, a quiet smile. They didn't speak the same language, but meaning found a way. It was during a maintenance check on the heating manifold that Kethra first spoke without edge. "You were a soldier," she said, standing behind him, watching as he adjusted a rusted valve. Damon didn't turn. You still are. He tightened the valve and finally glanced at her. Not anymore. Her gaze didn't waver. Soldiers do not stop being soldiers. They only stop fighting. And some of us stop for good reason. She tilted her head. You lost someone. Damon didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. Kethra's expression softened, ever so slightly. So did we. That night, they sat in the common room as the wind howled against the dome. Khe'lani curled asleep in the corner, wrapped in thick thermal blankets. Damon poured hot water into 2 old mugs, adding the last of the synthetic caffeine packs. Not much of a peace offering, he said, sliding one toward her. Kethra lifted it, sniffed it, then drank. Her face didn't flinch. Your customs are strange, she said. Yours aren't. She smirked, just barely. We do not drink warmth. We earn it. Damon leaned back in his chair. Maybe we're both out of practice. Later, she showed him a small device, a holostone, projecting brief flickers of Khe'lani history, lush forests, towering crystalline cities, a culture of grace and ferocity. She told him of the fall, of the genetic hunters, off-worlders who came not with armies, but with needles, seeking the Khe'lani genome. Their adaptability, their stealth, their resilience, all valuable to those who viewed life as raw material. Now, only a few clans remained, hunted, scattered, desperate. You're being tracked, Damon said, the pieces falling into place. That's why you were out there, running. Kethra nodded, but not hiding. And for the first time, he saw not just a refugee, he saw a fighter. He looked at Elena sleeping soundly in the corner, then back at Kethra. You found me in the ice, Damon said quietly. I didn't realize I was waiting. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was beginning to speak. The first drone passed overhead at 600 hours. Damon was in the outer corridor when he heard the faint, unnatural hum, too low for the storm winds, too controlled for random movement. He dropped his tool set, eyes narrowing, and rushed to the surveillance bay. Show me the sky, he ordered the console, breath quickening. The screen flickered, cutting through interference. There it was, a black speck moving in precise arcs above the snowline. Then another, and a third, triangulating. His blood went cold. They had found them. Kethra was already there when he turned. She didn't ask what was wrong. Her eyes were already on the screen, her posture stiffened like coiled wire. How long? She asked. Damon's voice was hard. Hours, maybe less. She nodded once and disappeared down the hall. When she returned, she was in full Khe'lani combat garb, a hybrid of fur-lined armor and flexible alloys, with strange etchings that pulsed softly in the dark. It was beautiful and deadly. You're planning to stay, Damon said. Of course. We could run and leave a trail through the snow. They'd follow. And you know it. He did. That's what haunted him. The old Damon would have already prepped the escape pods, wiped the logs, destroyed the comm relays. But that man had died with Raylene, or so he thought. Outside, the wind shifted. More drones. Then, static on the comms. Distant signals. Not human, but adapted from stolen code. Damon intercepted them, heart sinking. He patched the feed into the central display. A rough voice filtered through, distorted and venomous. Genetic signature confirmed. Khe'lani variant, female and child. Orders, capture alive. No mercy for host assets. Kethra's hand clenched the hilt of her blade. They bring the dark hunts. Genetic raiders, Damon said grimly. Biotech mercs. They don't leave survivors. He moved quickly now, fingers flying across old control panels, reactivating defense systems he'd mothballed years ago. Auto turrets began to spin up. Heat vents roared as they melted snow from the domes to prepare for thermal optics. Kethra watched him. You know war well? I tried to forget, he said. Turns out war remembers. In the corner, Elena watched silently, her small hands curled into fists. Damon walked to her and knelt. If you stay, there will be danger, he said. You understand? She nodded, no fear in her eyes, just quiet resolve. He stood and turned to Kethra. I'm not running, he said. Not this time. She met his gaze. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her hand on his chest. Then we fight together. Outside, the storm began to clear, not calm, but sharpen. And through the rising wind, shadows moved with purpose. The hunters were coming, but so was something else. A reckoning. When the first shot came, it lit the sky like a lightning strike, slicing through the snowfall with a hiss that made the entire station tremble. Damon didn't flinch. He stood beside the northern turret, calibrating the targeting array manually. Old tech, reliable. Like him, Kethra crouched at the west ridge, her tall silhouette ghostly in the swirling snow. She held no gun, only a curved Khe'lani warblade that shimmered with icy blue light. Beside her, Damon had placed a pulse rifle. She hadn't touched it. "They'll come in waves," Damon said over comms. "Probe, then surround. It's standard." "They expect prey," Kethra replied. "They'll find a pack." He allowed himself the smallest grin. Then he checked the charge on the magnetic mines he'd buried near the southern approach, a makeshift minefield laced through the glacier's natural fault lines. If they came from that angle, they'd step on fire. Inside the station, Khe'lani watched the screens from the inner control room, her eyes wide but unblinking. Damon had shown her how to read the perimeter alerts. Red meant proximity, blinking meant breach. She didn't ask questions. She only listened. "Stay near the core chamber," Damon had told her. "And if things go bad, you seal it, no matter what happens outside." But she'd started, no matter what. Now, as the first landing craft dropped through the storm with a metallic roar, Damon's instincts fully returned. His grief and guilt melted into something colder, sharper. Focus. The enemy ship came in hard and low, its undercarriage glowing with plasma exhaust. Damon waited, then triggered the anti-air turret. The blast punched through the clouds and slammed into the craft mid-descent. It spun out, clipped a ridge, and exploded into a blossom of fire. That was the first. The second landed clean. Doors opened. Hunters poured out. Black armor with bioadaptive cloaks, visors glowing sickly green. They moved in a wide arc formation, clearly expecting minimal resistance. Then the mines went off. Damon smiled at the shockwave as 5 of them vanished in a ripple of fire and snow. Kethra moved next. She burst from the ridge in a blur, blade singing through the air. Her strikes were brutal, not elegant, but purposeful. Every movement designed to kill or cripple. Damon watched her take down 3 raiders before they even raised their weapons. She was fury and frost. Damon joined the fray, rifle barking out precision bursts, his aim unerring. Years of buried training now rose like fire through ice. The battlefield shrank. Smoke clung to the wind. Blood, human and alien, melted into the snow. They fought back to back. Hunter after hunter fell. Khe'lani, watching from the control room, pressed her hand to the glass, whispering words in a language Damon didn't understand. But maybe he didn't need to. Because outside, amid flame and death, Damon Creed wasn't a ghost anymore. He was home, and he was not fighting for orders. He was fighting for family. The station walls shuddered under the concussion of a missile strike. Damon ducked instinctively, pressing his back against the inner bulkhead. Sparks cascaded from a ruptured power junction above. The lights flickered, then stabilized, barely. He tapped his ear. "Kethra, report." No response. "Repeat. Kethra, what's your position?" Still nothing. Panic clawed at his chest. He slammed the override panel and pulled up the external cams, cycling through smoke-filled angles. Then, finally, there, west quadrant. Her body lay half-buried beneath a collapsed girder, unmoving. "Khe'lani," he shouted, sprinting down the hall toward the exit. "Seal the inner doors behind me. But no argument. Lock it down." The girl's voice vanished under the hiss of closing airlocks. Damon stormed out into the frigid dusk, the snow now littered with the ruins of battle. Broken armor, blackened drones, heat still rising from cratered ground. The sky was thick with smoke and twilight. He found her fast. She hadn't moved. "Kethra," he rasped, kneeling beside her, brushing blood and snow from her face. Her eyes fluttered open, dull with pain. "Spines fractured," she whispered. "Lungs punctured." "No," he growled, hands already working beneath her armor. "You're not doing this. Not after all this. You must take Khe'lani and run." "I'm not leaving you." She grabbed his wrist, her strength still there in flickering sparks. Don't let her fall into their hands. His throat burned. You're not dying. Then, without warning, she lifted her hand to his forehead and pressed it to hers. The gesture was slow, trembling, ceremonial. "What is this?" he asked, voice breaking. Her breath was shallow. "Bonding. The soul mark of the Khe'lani." He shook his head. "Why now?" "Because you are kin. Because you stayed. Because I see my mate. In your grief." He couldn't speak. He simply nodded. And then, slowly, she smiled. A rare, soft thing. Before her body convulsed, breath catching in a shudder. "No, no, stay with me." He lifted her, cradling her in his arms, blood warm against his coat. He ran, back toward the station, back through fire and snow and smoke. Inside, Elina stood just behind the locked glass, her hands pressed to it in silent terror. The doors opened. She rushed to them. "Kaimar," she whispered, eyes wide, her word for father. He laid Kethra down in the medical bay, activating the Khe'lani medcore she'd shown him days ago, ancient, living tech that glowed faintly under his hands. He didn't know what it needed, but his blood was still on her. And somehow, that was enough. The machine came alive, threads of light weaving through her chest, spine, lungs, and Damon dropped to his knees beside her. "She saved me," he said to no one, and to everyone. "If she lives, I'll never run again." In the stillness, Elina reached out and took his hand. The snow outside continued to fall, but inside the ice, something bled, and something healed. The air in the station changed before the sensors even registered the breach. Damon felt it first, like the silence before a storm, a pressure that had nothing to do with atmosphere. Elina froze mid-step, her opaline eyes going wide with a fear she hadn't shown even during the assault. "Go to her," Damon said quickly, guiding the child toward the medical bay where Kethra lay unconscious beneath a matrix of glowing Khe'lani healing threads. "Seal the door behind you." Elina didn't argue this time. She turned and vanished down the corridor. Then the lights died, all of them, one by one, like candles snuffed by unseen breath. Damon moved fast, hand to his belt, switching to manual override, powering emergency red lights. The station glowed crimson, shadows stretching long and strange across the corridor walls. The outer airlock hissed open, not breached, opened, voluntarily. Damon raised his rifle, pulse sensor synced to thermal. But the signature that entered the station didn't match anything from the previous scans. It was colder than the air outside. Footsteps echoed, measured, unhurried. And then he saw him. A tall figure in matte black armor stepped into view, his helmet retracting with a hiss. Human, or what used to be. His face was scarred from radiation burns, one eye replaced with a humming blue lens, the other cold and familiar. Damon's breath caught. "Morn Sarek." The man smiled without warmth. "Didn't expect a reunion, did you? You're dead. You left me there. You betrayed the squad. I adapted, like you taught me to, except you adapted by running." Damon's grip tightened on his rifle. Vorn stepped closer, eyes scanning the chamber. "So, you've taken in the strays. They're under my protection. Then you've chosen your side." "Officially." Damon didn't answer. He didn't need to. Vorn paced slowly, admiring the station's damage. "The Khe'lani genome is worth more than most planets. A child and a pureblood. I can name my price. Walk away, Damon. I'll even say you tried to stop me. You're not touching them." Vorn sighed. "That's the problem with old war dogs. You think honor still matters, but out here, there's only survival." He raised a modified scatter pistol, and Damon fired first. The blast tore through Vorn's shoulder, but he didn't fall. His armor absorbed the worst of it, hissing steam. "Wrong choice," Vorn growled, voice distorted now, mechanical and venomous. He charged. Damon dodged, sliding under a swing and throwing himself into the corridor. "Elina, go now!" A crash behind him, metal buckling. The monster that had once been his comrade stalked him through the station, each step heavier than the last. But Damon wasn't running this time, not from guilt, not from ghosts. He sprinted into the central chamber, where Kethra's old blade, the one she'd brought but never used, hung above the console, a ceremonial relic. Until now, He grabbed it. It burned his palm and pulsed with light. Behind him, Vorn laughed. "You really think that'll save you?" Damon turned, eyes steady, blade glowing. "No," he said. "But she will." And Kethra's voice echoed from the hallway, weak, hoarse, alive. "You don't understand, Vorn. You stepped into our snow and sealed your fate." Vorn charged like a thunderclap, servos shrieking, scatter pistol blazing blue fire across the corridor. Damon rolled low, the ancient Khe'lani blade raised just in time to deflect a bolt that should have liquefied his chest. The impact shuddered through his bones, but the blade, gods, the blade, held. Kethra limped into view from the side passage, one arm bound tight against her chest, the other dragging a long spear of crystallized alloy from the wall mount. Her body trembled with pain, but her eyes burned with fire. "No mercy," she whispered. "None left to give," Damon replied. Vorn turned toward her, recognition flickering across his half-mechanical face. "Should have finished you when I had the chance." "You tried," Kethra spat, planting her spear in the ground with trembling defiance. "You failed." Damon moved first. He darted forward, slashing low. Vorn blocked it, but barely. The Khe'lani blade screamed as it scraped his armor, leaving a glowing scar that sizzled with kinetic energy. Kethra struck next, her spear arcing through the air to drive into Vorn's side. He caught it mid-swing, but the distraction was enough. Damon surged up from below and drove the blade through Vorn's abdomen. The sound it made was not human. Vorn roared and slammed his fist into Damon's chest, sending him sprawling into the wall. The air fled his lungs, but the blade stayed buried. Cracks formed in Vorn's armor as glowing tendrils of energy spread out from the wound. His systems began to glitch, lights blinking, motors stalling, breathing ragged and artificial. "You never had the strength," he rasped. Damon stood, blood in his mouth, chest heaving. "You never had the soul." Then he activated the charges, small detonators, buried in the ceiling, along the station's geothermal conduits, a plan he and Kethra had made in silence, in preparation, in trust. The blast tore through the corridor above Vorn, collapsing stalactites of frozen metal and fractured rock. The floor cracked. Gravity shifted. Snow and fire howled through the breach. Vorn fell into the ice below, half submerged in a fissure of his own making, the Khe'lani blade still glowing in his gut. His last words were static, and then he was gone. The chamber settled into eerie quiet. Smoke curled along the ruined walls. Kethra collapsed, but Damon caught her before she hit the floor. "You did it," she whispered, her voice paper-thin. "No," he said, resting her head against his chest. "We did." He helped her back into the medbay, where Elina waited, eyes wide, hands trembling. She rushed into her mother's arms and then into his. Damon embraced them both, his armor scorched, his heart full. The storm outside began to fade, as if the planet itself was breathing again. Damon stepped out into the snow alone, staring at the battlefield, not as a soldier, not as a ghost, but as something else. The wind kissed his face, and the ice did not bite. 3 months passed. The white deserts of Nira 7, once empty and howling with wind, now held quiet signs of life. Beneath the low-hanging clouds, Damon stood in the center of the outpost courtyard, holding a spade of hardened synth alloy. Around him, metal crates had been repurposed into makeshift planter beds, warmed from beneath by salvaged reactor coils. Pale green shoots pushed through black soil imported from the equatorial belt. He wiped sweat from his brow. The cold didn't bother him anymore. Not here, not now. Behind him, laughter echoed. Elina darted between towers of scrap and snow, chasing a small mechanical creature Damon had built for her, equal parts toy and guardian. She wore clothes stitched from Kethra's armor and his old uniforms, sleeves rolled and pockets stuffed with seeds. Her opaline eyes sparkled in the silver daylight, and from the main structure, Kethra emerged. She no longer limped. The Khe'lani healing systems had restored her strength, but not her scars. She wore them with pride now, streaks of pale skin across her arms and ribs. Her eyes found Damon instantly, a quiet smile on her face, the kind reserved not for warriors, but for those you build with. She carried a long staff made from the remains of the blade Damon had driven into Vorn's chest. The blade had fractured under the strain, but the hilt had survived. Kethra had reforged it, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. "You've been busy," she said, stepping beside him. He nodded toward the half-finished greenhouse. "Thought it was time this place did something besides echo pain." She looked at the horizon. "There are more Khe'lani, scattered, hiding. They'll come," Damon said. "We'll make room." As if on cue, the comm beacon lit up, a soft pulse, a coded signature from orbit. Another clan, arriving, another family. Damon felt the old ache in his chest return, not as sorrow, but as memory, of Raylene, of war, of what he'd lost. But the weight of it no longer crushed him. It was a root now, buried deep, feeding what came next. Elina ran up, holding out a small blue flower she'd coaxed from the soil. "For the wall," she said proudly. Damon took it gently and pressed it into the growing mural of plant life they'd begun inside the old war room. Vines crept over what used to be targeting schematics, life overriding death. Kethra wrapped her hand around his. "You stayed," she whispered. "I did." They stood there as the snow fell, soft this time, almost warm. The storm had passed. A soldier had died here. A guardian had taken root, and in the frostbitten silence of Nira 7, a new world had begun.